All right. So today's video is going to be about tithing. Are we as Christians commanded to tithe? I don't think so. No. But I do think we should tithe. So I'm going to take some time and look at the Bible, see what the Bible has to say about tithing. And then I also want to share some insight into where your money goes whenever you give to like your local church or a parish. And then lastly, I'm going to share how I give financially and how it's just a little bit different than the, I guess, like common way to give. So let's start in the book of Genesis. Genesis 14 is I think the first example of tithing or giving a tenth. And it's, Genesis 14, it's where Abram blesses Melchizedek, and he gives him a tenth of everything from the spoils of their victory. And it's not commanded, it's just something that he does. And then continuing in Genesis, in chapter 28, we see Jacob, who has a dream, and in the dream, the Lord reveals his identity and makes promises to Jacob about blessing his offspring and providing land and just promising to always be with Jacob. And then Jacob responds by making a vow to the Lord. And he essentially pledges to give a full tenth, a tithe of what's provided to him. He pledges to give it back to the Lord. And again, it's not commanded, it's just something that he does. Where we do see it commanded for a brief moment is in Leviticus 27. So we see tithing as a requirement here. And then lastly, in Numbers 18, we see a tithe is given to the Levites for their priestly duties. And something cool about the example in Numbers is the Lord tells Moses to instruct the Levites to tithe what was tithed to them. So it's a tithe of the tithe, which I think is so awesome, right? It's it kind of reminds me of like no one is exempt from this for that period where it was commanded, right? Even the people that are doing the work of the Lord have an obligation or a responsibility to be generous as well. And so I thought that was really cool. Okay, let's move on to the New Testament. So there's the famous verse, which is in Matthew 23. And this is where Jesus, all throughout Matthew 23, Jesus is addressing the scribes and Pharisees on a bunch of different topics. But in verse 23, Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others." So Jesus briefly addresses tithing, but he's really just getting to the heart of the issue, right? Which is what he perfectly does. He always addresses, or usually always addresses, the heart of the issue. And then that's basically it for tithing. But there are other verses in the Bible that talk about being generous and giving and supplying to others. So, for example, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, it says verses 6 and 7, it says, "Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." So again, it's kind of getting back to the heart. We kind of take it to the Lord and pre-decide what we want to give and to whom. And then another unrelated verse is in Luke 16:10. For whatever reason, this always makes me think of money, but it says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." So again, do we have to give? No. We can keep all our money and time and expertise and resources all to ourselves. But why would we do that? Instead, I think we should participate in a beautiful opportunity to trust God and to be a blessing to other people. And so if you don't think that you're making a difference, maybe you feel like you don't give enough or that the money's not used for good things, I want to tell you that a lot of the times your charity is providing for more than you know. So for example, in the Catholic Church, your money is used for all sorts of good things. A small portion is given for just like the living expenses of the priest. You also support like other staff members. You support the parish itself with utilities and maintenance and all of that. You have charities and other social services like food pantries and schools and different shelters, depending on where you live. And then there's also a percentage that will often go toward like Catholic schools or toward your diocese. And then the diocese will often use this money to fund like retirements for priests and seminarian education. It's used in Catholic Charities, which we know Catholic Charities does all sorts of great work. And it's also used to support, other administrative salaries and much more, right? So it's not just one thing. It's all sorts of different things, locally and then, outwardly as well. So I obviously think giving financially is really important. I think giving just in general is really important. And I know it's going to look a little bit different for each person and kind of where they are in their life. But something that's been working for me is giving a percentage to my local parish. And then I also like to give a percentage to other ministries, charities, and individuals all around the world. So each month I like to just pray and kind of seek out who the Lord wants to bless through me. And I go on all sorts of different ways to do this. So like crowdfunding websites, for example, like Give, Send, Go, or even GoFundMe, they have faith-based mission work. So you can kind of seek out people in that realm, or even just seek out people that maybe the Lord is drawing you to help. Maybe they need some extra help. Then there's also like local charities and individuals you can support like in your hometown. And then of course everything is online as well. So you could support on YouTube, you could support on other social media accounts through things like Patreon. I know a lot of people have like the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee thing or Patreon, or there's websites. Like there's the street evangelist kid, Bryce Crawford. His ministry allows you to make a tax deductible donation. So there's a lot of options for us to bless others, to give, to support with finances and time and resources and all that. So I think we as Christians, I say this a lot, but I think we need to try to be the example to others, to other Christians, to family, to friends, and of course to those that are outside of the faith. So I highly recommend asking the Lord what He wants to do with His money, and I promise He will tell you. Thanks. Bye.